Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Continuing with the teachings from the Ajahn Sumedho anthology, Vol.3, and this is the talks from the book called The Way It Is, and this is chapter 11, Accepting the Way Things Are, and all of these talks were, most of these talks were given in 1988 during the winter retreat here at Amaravati. Accepting the way things are. How many of you have been practicing today trying to become something? I've got to do this, or become that, or get rid of something, or got to do something. That compulsiveness takes over, even in our practice of Dhamma. Oh, I think that a question could apply today. How many of us have been trying to become something, get rid of something during the course of the day? These habits of working with the mind in these, these patterns of being driven by bhavatanha, the desire to become or to be, vibhavatanha, the desire to get rid of or to wipe out, to not be. These are persistent and very, hard to identify qualities in the meditation, and that is one of those aspects of the practice that is requires continual attention to see how much there's a trying to get something, trying to be something, trying to get rid of something, and that the more that the quality of self and conceit can be identified in that and recognized, then it can be let go of. And so that you can't just wish those kind of habits away, but what we can do is we can recognize them, and so that the more they're recognized, then the driving force, the impetus for Dhamma practice, then it becomes more naturally and easily the qualities of mindfulness and wisdom, rather than me trying to become something or me trying to get rid of something. This is the way it is, quote unquote, isn't a fatalistic attitude of not caring or being indifferent, but a real openness to the way things have to be at this moment. For example, right now, at this moment, this is the way it is. And it can't be any other way at this moment. It's so obvious, isn't it? Right now, no matter whether you are feeling high or low or indifferent, happy or depressed, enlightened or totally deluded, half enlightened, half deluded, 3/4 deluded, 1/4 enlightened, hopeful or despairing, this is the way it is. And it can't be any other way at this moment. This doesn't mean that we can't try to make things better, but we do so from understanding and wisdom rather than from an ignorant desire. So, just as I was saying, that quality of this is the way it is an openness of heart. It's the radical acceptance of this moment in all its facets, whatever we're experiencing, comfortable, uncomfortable, or somewhere in between, or as he says, half enlightened, half deluded, 3/4 deluded, 1/4 enlightened, or 99% deluded, 1% enlightened, or whatever it might be. Here it is, in this moment, is exactly this way. And just a few minutes before the reading today, Ajahn Amaro called me and said, asking something about Luang Por's medical appointments, and he said, "How are you, Ajahn?" And I said, "I'm exactly like this." And he said, "Oh, you too." So it was a very, very Dhammic exchange between the two of us. But that's often how I reply when people say, "How are you?" And, well, I'm like this, you know? And that's, I feel, a very accurate and truthful reply. But it is an ongoing dynamic. There's a way of, yes, the present moment is exactly like this. There's an open-hearted attunement, a receptivity to how it is at this moment. But part of the way it is the capacity of the heart to respond. And the more there is a genuine quality of metta, that radical acceptance of things, then that frees up the qualities of mindfulness and wisdom to operate. And then part of that mindfulness and wisdom is a recognition of this is a direction that looks beneficial, this looks wholesome, this looks like it's going to lead towards peace and liberation. This direction looks like it's going to lead towards more confusion and difficulty and struggle. So part of that acceptance is that, say, attunement and that activation of that quality of wisdom, of say, wise understanding. As he says, we do so from understanding and wisdom. So that understanding is, this looks like a good way forward, this looks like a way that's going to lead to difficulty and dukkha. So then that openness then informs choice and our ability to act, and our actions, our choices, are also part of the way things are. I say this over and over again, but I feel it bears repeating that our choices are not an intrusion upon the way things are or a distortion of the way things are, but they're part of the way things are. Our ability to act and decide to give direction to our lives, our actions, our speech, that's also part of the way things are. So it's a principle that Luang Por is talking a lot about in this collection of teachings. This is the way it is. It's not a fatalistic attitude of not caring or being indifferent, but rather it's that radical openness, that radical acceptance of this moment, exactly this way. How does your body feel? Just notice that the body is this way. It's heavy, it's earthbound, it's coarse. It gets hungry, it feels heat and cold, it gets sick. Sometimes it feels very nice, sometimes it feels horrible. This is the way it is. Human bodies are like this. So this tendency to want them to be otherwise falls away. The world is this way. Things happen. It snows and the sun comes out. People come and go. People have misunderstandings. People's feelings get hurt. People grow lazy or inspired, depressed and disillusioned. People gossip and disappoint each other. There's adultery, theft, drunkenness and drug addiction, and there are wars, and there always have been. So I think up to that last sentence, all of that applies to life at Amaravati. It snows and the sun comes out. Yes, indeed. People come and go. Yes, indeed. People have misunderstandings. People's feelings get hurt. Yes, that's the way it is. People grow lazy or inspired, depressed and disillusioned. People gossip and disappoint each other. So that's community life. That's the human world. Sometimes we inspire each other. Sometimes we irritate each other. Sometimes we speak very carefully and very respectfully, and with honesty, and with our words crafted towards encouragement and say a quality of concord. Sometimes our words are divisive. They're filled with gossip and criticism, or they're filled with ideas and opinions that generate anxiety and division, confusion. That's the way that we are, not praising that or saying we just are not sensitive to the wholesome and the unwholesome, but rather recognizing that's the field of experience. Sometimes it's sunny, sometimes it's rainy. That's the range of experiences. Today was very spring-like. There's even a daffodil just about to open up outside my kuti. There's a few daisies have opened up. There's primroses here and there. So snowdrops are out, so that the signs of spring are there. But then also, the weather can easily change, and there's an icy freeze, and everything gets chilled once again, so that this quality of being open to the way it is, it's a recognition that we're not tying our happiness to the conditions of pleasantness or unpleasantness, or to things being freezing and wintry, or sunny and spring-like, or that the people around us are all beautifully behaved or badly behaved, whether they're inspiring or uninspiring. But that the point is that radical acceptance of whether it should be or shouldn't be this way. Right now it's like this, and then that openness is what then enables us to recognize, well, that's really an unwholesome or an unskillful way to speak. That's not very helpful. Or that's really beautiful. That's really encouraging and helpful. That openness helps the mind to acknowledge those different qualities, free of confusion, free of biases. Here in a community like Amaravati, we can see the way things are. Now it's the weekend, so this is those of you who can remember what it was like on a weekend when people used to come and visit. So that those of you who are new to Amaravati might not have ever even experienced a busy weekend, but those of us who have lived here for some time will be very aware of what a Saturday and a Sunday could be like in the Sala in particular. So now it's the weekend, when more people come to offer alms food, and it's more crowded and noisy. There are people pounding vegetables and chopping things, with everything going on all over the place. Sometimes there are children running up and down screaming. You can observe, this is the way it is. Rather than think, these people are impinging on my silence. I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be otherwise. That might be the reaction, if you like, the quiet orderliness of the meal when there's none of that activity, and there are no loud noises or harsh sounds. But life is like this. This is the way life is. This is human existence. So in our minds, we embrace the whole of it, and this is the way it is, quote unquote, allows us to accept the changes and movements from the silent to the noisy, from the controlled and ordered to the confused and muddled. That used to be I'm not sure where we were having the sittings. I think that winter retreat of 1988, I think we were using the Sala as our meditation hall. So using that as a meditation space during the morning on the weekend would have been particularly an active opportunity to contemplate noise and the clattering of pots and pans and people chatting away in the kitchen if there was all of us gathered together in the main hall of the Sala practicing meditation. But that is, I think, a very important and profound insight, and that Luang Por himself spoke of this quite a number of times. Many of his Dhamma talks, he referred to an insight he had when he was a young Tudong monk, and he was sitting off in the forest, and the local village, as it was mentioning a couple of readings ago, that the PA systems are very popular in rural Thailand, and broadcasting the songs and the music through the local district. So if the people in the village are having a fair, then they have some music going all night. And so Luang Por was sitting in the forest and getting sort of grumpy and irritated by the noise coming from the rowdy carousing in the village. And then he realized that the noise was just being noisy. It was just doing what noise does. And it was, if there was a problem, the problem was only coming from his mind. It wasn't coming from the sound itself. That the sound is just the sound. You think, he said, you think that the sound is annoying you, but it's not. It's you that's going out to annoy the sound. And that was a profound insight for him, and so it came up in many of his Dhamma teachings. And it's very true that we can be in a situation like this, say, at Amaravati, and a lot of noise going on around us, or sitting in the Sala before the mealtime on a Sunday would be kind of crowded with people chattering away, or after the mealtime even more. People are sitting down all over the floor with their food and chatting with the family, and I'd often have to say to people, could you sit a bit closer, or can you speak up? There's such a wall of noise. But the mind itself is silent, and so that you can tune into that inner silence even as the ears are rattling with all of the noise, and that even in the presence of a lot of noise and color and movement and activity, that quality of the mind's stillness and spaciousness, its own silence, doesn't have to be interrupted or occluded, doesn't have to be screened or obstructed by the presence of the loud and the noisy and the active, and that is a very important skill, a very useful insight, and a very important skill to develop, and very, very handy for particularly times when you're not on retreat or you're out and about in the world, and to be able to say. Be open to the noise and activity, busyness around one, but not to be swept up in it, not to be complaining about it or oppressed by it or wanting to get away from it, but rather sort of realizing that that which knows the noise isn't noisy. That which knows all the movement and activity is not moving. That which is sort of aware of the crowdedness is spacious. It's not cramped or crowded. The awareness of the mind, of the heart, accommodates all the sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, and is not intrinsically obstructed by that. I remember many years ago I was staying up at a Tibetan center up in the north, and they had several pujas, 3 or 4 times a day. I think it was at Samye Ling, and I was living up at Harnham. This was in the mid-80s before I came to Amaravati, and I was invited to go and visit a few different Buddhist centers around the area, and they had pujas 3 or 4 times a day, and I would go along to all of those, and they have a lot of drums and trumpets and this very deep, sonorous chanting that they do, and that was something that I noticed during that time. Those few days I was there at Samye Ling and being in the pujas, it's like, oh my goodness, it's really noisy. But actually, it's quiet. The mind that is knowing the noise is really quiet. So that insight of Luang Por Chah's, that really sort of came home to me, I think, for the first time at that point, where it's like, oh my goodness, there is a lot of noise. It's really loud, and the have different musical instruments, cymbals and drums and trumpets and whatnot, and the human voices, but yet at the same time there's an inner silence, and that the sound of the chanting and the puja didn't obstruct the silence, and so that's a very helpful quality that we can tune into outside of pujas. When you're on a crowded underground train in London, or if you're in the midst of a busy, noisy Sunday midday at Amaravati, that's a good exercise to carry out, to see if you can notice that inner silence in the presence of all the noise, or the inner stillness where there's a lot of activity and movement around one. So any thoughts, questions, reflections? Okay, I'll carry on. One can be a very selfish Buddhist, wanting life to be very quiet and to be able to practice, quote unquote, with plenty of time for sitting, plenty of time for studying the Dhamma and thinking. I don't want to have to receive guests and talk to people about silly things. I don't want to blah, blah, blah. You can be a very, very selfish person as a Buddhist monk. You can want the world to align itself with your dreams and ideals, and when it doesn't, you don't want it anymore. But rather than make things the way that you want them, the Buddha's way is to notice the way things are. And it's a great relief when you accept the way it is, even if it's not very nice, because the only real misery is not wanting it to be like that. So that's a common aspiration, or that crops up for a number of people that certainly I've met over the years, trying to have a perfect living environment as a Buddhist monastic, and to be fully in control of the people who come to visit, or what happens in the routine, or the administration of the place. And it's not absolutely always the case, but it seems over and over again that the more determined someone is to establish a place exactly as they want, the more that the universe conspires to make it difficult for them. That they'll try and set things up in a way that fits what they want and is absolutely in accord with their preferences. But then they'll get a leg injury, so that they can't sit on the floor, or they can't climb a hill, or they've built the perfect kuti on a hilltop, and then they can't climb the hill because their knees are shot. Or that they'll say, I don't want to have anything to do with administration, that's entirely up to the committee, I don't want to be bothered with committee meetings or finances or anything of that nature. And then, okay, that's a good aspiration. But then you find that the committee members start arguing with each other and get into great conflict and difficulty. And I could elaborate on many possible details, but it tends to be that way. The more that you're determined to control things and fix things in a certain way, then necessarily you're out of tune with the way things are. And so I wouldn't say that the universe isn't conspiring to make things difficult for you. It's just your determination to have things in a certain way is causing you to say conflict and collide with the people around you. I remember many years ago, in the early days of Amaravati, we had different Buddhist groups would hire out the retreat center. We only had 2 or 3 retreats in a year, and so we'd lend it. Different groups could hold retreats at Amaravati, and one particular group, they had a very, very strict meditation regime, and so that had a very tightly controlled environment within the meditation hall, within the living spaces, and it seemed that it was we didn't set anything up to make life difficult for them, or didn't try to make things problematic. But it was kind of one problem after another, and various people with psychological problems also happened to show up at that time and headed straight for the retreat center. It was just sort of started, walking through the meditation hall, that people we didn't even know very well. So it was a strange circumstance. But and then we weren't trying to make it difficult. We were not trying to be slack in controlling the environment. We were trying to respect their wishes. But it was the case that more and more things sort of came along that would disturb the kind of hermetically sealed, the tightly controlled environment. And that seems to be the way things go. The more that you are determined to have it in a particular way, that is planting the causes for dukkha. You're setting things up for dissatisfaction, and that if you are say, okay, this is how I'd like it to be. This is my ideal. But let's see how things are. Let's see what really needs one's attention. So that if you realize, well, I'd like to not have to go to committee meetings and not be involved with finances, but people need some input or need some direction, and so that my advice or my input is going to be useful here to a certain degree, or that, oh yes, I'd really like to be able to have so these days when we have no visitors, but we need to be able to fit in with people's work schedules and their family life, and so that yes, it's an ideal to not have, nobody can visit on a Thursday or a Monday or a whatever, but for some people that's the only day they can come. So that if there's an adaptability, a flexibility, then you can say respect your ideals and have that as a guiding principle, but you're not turning that into a cause of conflict and dukkha for yourself. So that it's and one of my like Luang Por is using the phrase "this is the way it is" as a theme. One of my similar phrases is adaptability is the key to happiness. And that's so coming from many years of living in community life, living in monasteries, that if you don't want to adapt, if you're determined to have things my way, how it should be, then that is the key to unhappiness, I would say, that you're setting things up. There's a good intention, a skillful intention, but in that rigidity or that sense of, no, I've got to have this, I've got to have this kind of kuti, I've got to have this kind of walking path, I've got to have this set up with the visitors and the support system and the lay donors, and it's got to be this way, and I won't tolerate anything else. Right there, there's dukkha, absolutely guaranteed, either immediately or down the line, because of that fixity, that rigidity, and so that quality of adaptability is really crucial in the whole process of liberation, I would say. Whether things are going well or not so well, if we don't accept the way things are, the mind tends to create some form of misery. So if you're attached to things going nicely, you'll start worrying if they go less well, even when they're actually still going well. I've noticed that with little things, such as when it's a sunny day and one jumps for joy, and then the next thought will be, oh, but in England the sun can disappear in the next moment. As soon as I've grasped one perception and I'm jumping for joy at the sunshine, the unpleasant thought arises that it may not last. Whatever you're attached to will bring on its opposite. This is what I was saying. Again, it's not the universe, sort of the gods of karma plotting to make life miserable for you. It's just the way nature is, the way nature works. That's how it functions. Whatever you're attached to will bring on its opposite. And when things aren't going very well, the mind tends to think, I want them to go better than this. So suffering arises whenever there is the grasping of desire. The sensory world is pleasurable and painful. It's beautiful and ugly. It's neutral. There are all gradations, all possibilities in it. This is just what sensory experience is about. But when ignorance and the self-view are operating, I only want pleasure and I don't want pain. I want only beauty and I don't want ugliness. Please, God, make me healthy. Give me a good complexion, physical attractiveness, and let me stay young for a long time. Get lots of money, wealth and power, no sickness, no cancer, lots of beautiful things around me. Surround me with beauty and the pleasures of the senses at their best, please. Then the fear will come that maybe I'll get the worst. I could get leprosy, AIDS, Parkinson's disease or cancer, and I might be rejected and despised and humiliated. Left alone out in the cold, hungry, sick and in danger, with wolves howling and the wind blowing. So that last reference there, the wolves howling and the wind blowing, that is informed by a nimitta, a visionary experience that Luang Por Sumedho had back in the very early days that he was in England, when he was living at the Hampstead Vihara in London. And he's often mentioned this in various talks, and it was something that formed a very helpful insight. So that he often say that he was quite attached to being in a warm, sunny place, and that's why he gravitated to Thailand rather than Japan for Buddhist training, because he was put off by the idea of the freezing zendos in the Buddhist monasteries in Japan. But Thailand's a nice, hot, sunny, tropical country. And so he could see he was quite attached to physical comfort. And when he was sitting meditating in Hampstead one time, there was this nimitta. Nimitta means a sign, literally. This visionary experience that took shape in his mind, and he could see himself out in this frozen wasteland of the Arctic. And he was completely alone. He was naked. It was freezing cold wind, and there was a sound of wolves on the wind. And so he was all the things that he most hated and were most off-putting, to be too cold, alone, out in the Arctic, and it was a kind of Arctic twilight, like the dim light of the sort of Arctic winter, and all the signs of danger and misery and cold and loneliness, and he said, so it was all of the signs of what's miserable and dangerous and painful and unwanted, but yet it was completely peaceful. there was this extraordinary peace and ease within him, even though there was this, this terrible, dangerous situation, and the sound of the wolves howling on the wind, and so that at the time he understood that to be related to his experience of being in London, having left the forest in Thailand and living close to Luang Por. Then he was there in this house in London. There was just 4 monks living there together, and it was quite a challenging living situation, very different from the forest in Thailand, and very different from being close to the great master and being able to receive his teachings and his advice and guidance. And so the intuitive association that Luang Por Sumedho made was that even though the living conditions in London, that they were away from their homeland, they were away from the teacher, it's a non-Buddhist country, they would go out on alms round every day and no one would ever put any food in their bowls, apart from a local woman who became the first of the nuns, Sister Rochna. She was a laywoman then. She would be out on the street in Hampstead, kind of waiting for the monks to come by. She would offer food once in a while, but it was a very challenging and also a bleak situation for Ajahn Sumedho at that time. But yet there was that incredible peacefulness and this inner silence and ease, and so that it was a powerful sign for him that there's no need to be deluded or taken in by the apparent negative circumstances. That even if things are difficult and challenging and exactly what you don't want or you don't feel at home in, you can still be fully at peace. There can be great peace, great ease, great contentment within that. So it was a powerful nimitta for him, and it was also around this time he started to develop the inner listening, the listening to the inner sound as a practice. And as an aside, he was telling that story at a retreat in California, talking to people about encouraging them not to be dependent on external circumstances, and that I think because there was a sense that people there could be very, very particular about how they wanted their meditation retreat to be or how they wanted their practice to be. And he was using this as an example that the circumstances, you can be sick and cold or alone, and things could be really unfortunate. You can have leprosy, AIDS, Parkinson's disease, cancer, all of the unwanted and painful perceptions. But yet you can be fully at peace, fully at ease within that. And so anyway, he was telling that story on this Dhamma talk when an interview session came around a few days later. One of the people on the retreat said, Luang Por Sumedho, would you like to go to the Arctic? And he said, yes, I would. And so that was the genesis of the trip to Svalbard that myself, Ajahn Amaro, made with Luang Por back in 2003, I think it was. That's nearly 20 years ago now. So that it was on account of that Dhamma talk. We went there and we meditated out in the Arctic, the frozen Arctic wastelands. It was quite a wonderful experience. So, any questions, thoughts, comments? Anyone want to go to the Arctic?
Listening to Luang Por Sumedho's talk reminds me of just, how sort of, at least in my mind, wonderful our tradition is, in that, yes, there is that sense of adaptability, but what shall we say? We know how to adapt, because, what shall we say? We don't adapt by eating afternoon. We don't adapt by handling money. If we didn't have very clear guidelines and clear knowledge instead of adapting the rules to self-view, which is how it could easily, I think certainly before I came upon this tradition, I can think of a couple spiritual sort of people who talked about adaptability but didn't have those rules. And my own opinion is that we do a bit better than that. So that's and of course, Luang Por Sumedho, has both aspects very strongly.
Yeah, that was one of the challenges when they first came to England. Was Luang Por was being bombarded, it sounded like, from various different quarters. Everyone was telling him what he had to do to adapt to the new environment, and how they couldn't sit on the floor to meditate because hippies sit on the floor, so they should sit on chairs to meditate, that they would have to use money to get around on the underground and so on and so forth. And that in a way, in the spirit of what you're describing, or as I'm hearing it, Luang Por said, "Well, we'll respectfully hear what people have got to say and their suggestions, and then we'll try things out. And what we discover as we live here, living in this climate, then if there's things we really do need to change, then we'll change them. If there's things we don't need to change, then we won't change them." So when they went out on alms round, first of all, they used to go barefoot, which was fine in the summertime. They arrived in July. They arrived in May, and Luang Por Cha and Luang Por Sumedho and Luang Por Dhamma, they came in May, and then Ajahn Viradhamma and Ajahn Ananda joined them in July. So it was summertime. So they'd go on alms round through Hampstead and on Hampstead Heath barefoot. Then as it came to sort of November, December, then Luang Por Sumedho, they would come back from the alms round with blue feet. And so people at the Vihara, people like Sister Rojana, who was a laywoman who was very, very dedicated to looking after the Sangha, she said, "Venerable Sumedho, your feet are blue, this is terrible. You can't possibly go on the alms round barefoot." And so then realizing, okay, this is just like in the Vinaya, where modest people spread it about. How can these monks walk around barefoot in the snow? They're getting blue feet. They're going to injure themselves. Surely the sandals should be allowable for the Sangha. So then they started wearing sandals and socks to go out on Bindabat and such like. And so then like these jackets that we have, they were an adaptation. But the things that we didn't need to change, then, in order to just be respectful of the tradition and also of the renunciate lifestyle, then it was clear that those kind of things like eating just in the morning time or not using money, they didn't need to be. They didn't need to be changed, and so. It's generally much easier to, in terms of Dhamma practice, it's easier to change your mind than to change the world, but not everyone sees it that way. And that to find happiness is often rearranging the world to make ourselves happy is what a lot of life in sort of the ordinary worldly living situations is about. Changing the furniture, changing your job, changing your partner, changing your diet. Changing your living place, and that's one of I find the great blessings of meditation is that you find you can change your mind, you can change your attitude. So, I was saying I have to have this or I can't stand that. Who says that's true? Why don't I just see it differently? Oh, and some things is harder to let go of than others, but that. The capacity that we have to change our view and to change the way we relate to particular conditions, physical conditions, and living situations, that's a great power that we have. Yes, Sister Tanavichaya.
quick question, Ajahn. I'm just wondering, how was the experience of the Arctic in the tropical cotton robes?
In Svalbard?
In Arctic, yeah.
In the Arctic. We adapted. That we did the best we could. We couldn't get monk-coloured down jackets. But I think we adapted to as best we could. I think the ones that Luang Por and Ajahn Amaro had were black. I had Ajahn Pasno lent me the one that his father's old parka. So if you look at the photographs from that trip, we're fairly modestly clad, but it's the Arctic, so it's 72. It's the 72nd parallel, so you're about 500, 600 miles from the North Pole. It's pretty chilly. So when we were out in the snow, then we had our robes on, but we had sort of these down jackets over the top, and then woolly hats, a couple of layers of woolly hats and mittens and such like. But if we were there's a small town, Longyearbyen, which has a population of 1,000. That's the main town of Svalbard. Then if we were walking through the town, then we just had our robes on with a few jumpers and mittens and a couple of layers of socks underneath, and then really good. I had some Canadian snow boots to be in that environment. Then it was really helpful having Ajahn Pasno as the co-abbot at Abhayagiri, because he could clue me in with what you need, what you don't need. Because having grown up in northern Manitoba, he was really well sussed about Arctic conditions. But it was, if you had a few layers on, then you could sit in the snow, and it was incredibly peaceful. The silence there was absolutely astonishing. There's no ambient sound. If the wind wasn't blowing, there's no ambient sound. There's no planes overhead. There's no birds. There's no trees for the wind to blow through. It's incredibly quiet. So the nada sound was exceptionally clear and loud there. So it was, and then also because it was May when we were there, and it took me a few days to get used to it, but it was light the whole time. So I remember the first day we were out, we had gone out on these sleds out into the wilderness to meditate, and I was looking at my watch, and I thought, oh, it's 3 o'clock, it's going to get dark soon, we should get back. We're far away from the town, and so we had these two guides with us, and I said, it's 3 o'clock. Shouldn't we be getting back? And he kind of looked at me and said, why? I said, well, isn't it going to get dark soon? And he said, October. Oh, right. And he meant it was like noon here at the moment. It was like midnight there. It was just slightly dimmer than usual, but on a cloudy day at noon in the winter, that would be about the same as midnight there. So it just didn't get dark. So you could take as long as you wanted. You weren't going to get lost in the dark in the snow because there's no dark. So there was a lot of things you let go of. So Luang Por say, what time do you think dawn is? This is what when we gather in the hotel dining room for breakfast. That's when we can call that dawn. But it doesn't get dark, so there was no dawn. There was no twilight. There was no nighttime. So the far north is a great area of exploration for the Vinaya masters. Up in the above the 70th parallel, all kinds of things are different there. So, but it was a really wonderful environment to meditate in, because even when it started snowing, again, you're so wrapped up, you could just be sitting there and the snow's coming down and you just turn into a snow monk, It's time to get up, you walk away, because the warm gear that we had was very efficient, and so that it was really quite comfortable, and the the sense of being in a completely different realm was something I hadn't experienced that to quite the same degree. So it was a very, very lovely opportunity. I was extremely glad that Luang Por invited me along to that. So not to arouse jealous feelings of, I want to go to the Arctic, but it was a unique and wonderful event. And then and these guys, the people who were our guides and who sort of drove the snowmobiles to take us out into the wilderness. At the end of the time, we had a little sort of chat with them, and they said, "Can you ask us, why you wanted to do this?" So we said, when we normally have tourists here, they want to go and see polar bears, or they want to go out to the coast and see where the walruses are, or but we've never had a group of tourists who just wanted to go out into the wilderness and sit still for 5 hours. And we said, well, we are Buddhist monks, and so this is part of our lifestyle. This is what we like to do, is to meditate. And then one of them said, the first day we went out, I brought a novel with me, a book to keep me entertained, and because I thought I'd be so boring just going out into the wilderness and just to sit still for 5 hours. He said, but I said, by the third day of doing this, I realized I haven't looked at my book, and I'm really enjoying this. So I think you've ruined me, which was quite touching. And then Luang Por then told him the story of this nimitta that he'd had in Hampstead, and that this was something that had not that he was sort of waiting for the day to happen, but it had a profound transformative effect on him, and so that the opportunity to actually be out in the Arctic and in this sort of snowy wilderness, and we didn't have wolves, but there were polar bears around, that added the sudden alertness to one's perceptual field. And anyway, Luang Por told that story of his nimitta and how much it meant to him. And then he said, you made my dream come true. And then this kind of hard-bitten Arctic guide, you could see this little tear coming down. He actually kind of shed a tear and thought, oh, thank you for telling me that. And that was nearly 20 years ago, but I'm pretty sure that those guys, they won't have forgotten that there would have been a kind of a mark in their world to feel and to know, to be a part of the Arctic in a different way. To continue. From the viewpoint of the self, there's a tremendous fear of rejection, ostracism, or being despised in our society. There's a fear of being left alone and unwanted. There's a fear of being old and left to die alone. There's a natural fear of physical danger, of being in situations where our bodies are in danger, and there's the fear of the unknown, the mysterious, ghosts and unseen spirits. So we gravitate to security, cozy little places with electricity, central heating, insurance, and guarantees on everything. Taxes paid and legal contracts, all of these give us a sense of safety. Or we seek emotional security. Say you'll always love me. Say you'll love me even if you don't really mean it. Make everything safe and secure. And in that demand, there's always going to be anxiety because of the grasping at desire. That was also a common phrase that Luang Por would use. I think it came from an old Hollywood movie that he had seen and remembered. This particular dialogue, an old black and white movie where one of the people in a partnership says, tell me you love me, even if you don't mean it, I don't care, I just want to hear you say it. And so that would come up in Luang Por's Dhamma talks quite regularly. Like, tell me you love me, even if you don't mean it, just tell me. Just to give that sense of emotional coziness. So monastics are developing a light around the uplifting of the human spirit rather than around material guarantees. As alms mendicants, you take the risk that you might not get anything to eat. You might not have a shelter. You might not have any really good medicine. You might not have anything nice to wear. People are very generous, but as mendicants, we don't take that for granted, assuming that we deserve it. We're grateful for whatever's offered and cultivate the attitude of few wants, few needs. We need to make ourselves ready to be able to leave and relinquish everything at any moment, to have the kind of mind that doesn't think, this is my home, I want it to be guaranteed to me for the rest of my life. No matter how it goes, we adapt. Our needs are few. And so we make adaptations to life, to time and place, rather than making demands. Whatever way it goes is the way it is. Whatever diseases we may catch, or whatever tragedies, catastrophes or successes we experience, from the best to the worst, one can say, this is the way it is. And in that, there is acceptance and non-anger, non-greed, and the ability to cope with life as it's happening. So this also points to the standards that we take on when we enter into the Sangha, the four supports, at the end of the Upasampada, the ordination ceremony, and also is there as a standard for the nuns community. The four supports we reflect upon is robes, alms food, shelter and medicine, that we deliberately and consciously undertake the lowest standard, and so that in the formal exhortation after the ordination ceremony, then as the preceptor I go through that with the candidates and to spell that out, that okay, this is the standard that you're agreeing to, is alms food, just whatever food lands in your bowl, whatever food you're offered, that's the food to be content with. To have robes, clothing made out of discarded rags, refuse rag robes, any kind of cloth, any kind of robes, robe material that is available. That's understood to be good enough. Just living in the root of a tree, a basic shelter, to be content with the most minimal shelter, and then fermented urine as medicine, as the most sort of basic medical treatment possible. That you deliberately undertake the lowest standard of living. You make a conscious agreement. This is what I can expect: is this alms food, rag robes, and so on and so forth. And so that anything extra, anything other than that, is taken as a bonus or something, as a pleasant improvement on that. But that's an extremely skillful psychological tool that the Buddha established right from the very beginning, so that it again helps us to be adaptable. That you might be happier with the food being offered at one monastery than in another monastery, or when one person is the head cook at Amaravati and another person is the head cook, or the particular days when certain people come to make offerings. Oh, it's Tuesday group, that you might have that kind of perception arising in the mind, but the standard of just I've agreed to live on alms food. That's my basic agreement. So whether it's the food that I like or the food that I don't like, it's fine. And that's what is is profoundly liberating. It sets a standard. Again, you're planting the seeds for ease and peacefulness, so that even though preferences and experiences of discomfort or difficulty might arise, then you're not feeding the complaining mind or the criticizing, discontent mind, but rather you're recognizing, well, right now it's like this. It's cold. The first day we went out into the Arctic, it was May, and so it was only 0. So I thought, well, it's not even below freezing. I don't really need to wrap up that much. 8 hours out at 0, and I was kind of shivering from the middle outwards by the time we came back. Okay, 2 pairs of long johns tomorrow, and extra maybe 2 thermal vests instead of 1. And so, but it was cold. Just those kind of breathing in air at 0 degrees for 8 hours. The system gets a bit chilled, and so that you're feeling like this is cold. This is cold. And the the mind is not complaining or criticizing or getting upset about it. So that's I feel is a very, very helpful mirror for the mind that says, I've got to have this and I can't stand that, and I want to have my living situation this way and it shouldn't be that way. It's a profound source of contentment, of santutita, contentment, and that's a cause support for peacefulness and the heart really being at ease in all situations. We're not here to become anything, get rid of anything, change anything, make anything for ourselves or demand anything, but to awaken more and more, to reflect, observe, and to know the Dhamma. Don't worry that things might change for the worse. However they change, we have the wisdom to adapt to them. And I can see that this is the real fearlessness of the alms mendicant life. We can adapt. We can learn wisely from all conditions. Because this lifetime is not our real home. This lifetime is a transition we're involved in, a journey through the sensory realm. And there are no nests, no homes, no abiding in this sensory realm. It's all very impermanent, subject to disruption and change at any moment. That is its nature. That's the way it is. There's nothing depressing about that if you no longer make the demand for security in it. The reality of existence is that there isn't any home here. So the homeless life, going forth into mendicancy, is what is called a heavenly messenger, because the religious spirit no longer shares the delusions of the worldly mind, which is very determined to have a material home and security. Instead, you have the trust in Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and the teaching and the opportunities as mendicants and meditators to develop the insight and understanding to free the mind from the anxieties that come from attachment to the sensory realm as a home. The idea of owning and hanging on to things is the illusion of the worldly life. The view of the self sends forth all these delusions from which we have to protect ourselves all the time. We're always endangered. There's always something to be worried about, something to be frightened of. But when that illusion is punctured with wisdom, there's fearlessness. We see this is a journey, a transition through the sensory realm, and we're willing to learn the lessons it teaches us, no matter what those lessons might be. So there's a number of aspects to that. I often during those ordination ceremonies, the Papaja and Upasampada, and also Anagarika precept ceremonies, going into the homeless life, that you're consciously letting go of those material homes. Gara is a home or a house, Anagara is a homeless one. So that there's a conscious letting go of those worldly homes, and the recognition that the citta is our real home, that any aspect of the worldly life, Amaravati, this temple, my kuti, I've been living in that kuti for 10 years, but it's not my real home. It's a nice, cozy place with a wood-burning stove, and I appreciate those cozy aspects of living there, but the skillful thing to do, and reflecting on the four supports, is to look at your dwelling as a roof over the head for one night. And that's it. If you might have lived in the same place for 10 years, 20, 30 years, but if you're relating to it skillfully, then you're ready to pack up and go the next day and leave it behind. The verse number 91 of the Dhammapada is one I like to reflect on in this light, because it says, the wise exert themselves. They're not attached to any home. Like swans that abandon the lake, they leave home after home behind. The wise exert themselves. So if you're wise, you put energy into your practice, you exert yourself, and you leave home after home behind. So rather than, okay, now I've got a really good place to live, this is what I like, okay, I've really arrived, this is good. That like swans that abandon the lake, like a swan lives on a particular lake for a period of time and then takes off and leaves that lake, goes somewhere else, then we should be ready to leave those homes behind. And not just our kind of physical shelters, like a kuti, but our psychological homes as well. That the things that we like to identify with, it can be our health, our reputation, our friendships. They're having to be leaving the people that we get on with, leaving them behind. There's all kinds of homes that we make of one kind or another, kind of psychological abidings, and we can make a home in our reputation, in our seniority, in our personal story. We can make a lot of different kind of homes. So the practice of Dhamma, really taking refuge in Dhamma, embodying being Dhamma, then that's leaving all of those homes behind, leaving your seniority, your name, your family, your story, your reputation. It's not making any abiding, not making any of those a home, an identity, and something that the heart depends upon. Any as Luang Por puts it here, this lifetime is a transition we're involved in, a journey through the sensory realm. There are no nests, no homes, no abiding. And that's challenging to the ego, to the habits of self-view, that there are certain aspects that we like to hang on to, our personal story, our friendships, our physical health, our opinions, our reputation or our seniority. But it's good to be able to not be dependent on that. I find that when I used to travel, other than this mysterious year of the pandemic, I would like to travel on aeroplanes or being on the London Underground or at the train going from Berkhamsted into Euston, because you're just another blob in a carriage. Just like there you are sitting in the seat, J17, or you're just squished into an underground carriage. You're just another human being. I'm not the abbot of Amaravati. I'm not Ajahn Amaro. I'm just another bloke on the train, another person in the departure lounge. And that in that moment, in that kind of situation, that it's good to reflect in that way. Nobody knows your name. You're sitting there in the departure lounge or on a train. They don't know your name. They don't know your story. They don't know your family. They don't have any kind of a sense of your background. You don't have to carry that around. And those are good opportunities to get a perspective on those many homes, those many abidings that we create. And some of them are easier to let go of than others. If you're in a room in the monks' vihara that you don't particularly like, I'm not attached to this home, can I change? But it might be the case that you're quite eager to move into a different room, but letting go of your personal history, the things that you're proud of, things about your own mind, your own achievements that you like to dwell upon, or that are really pleasing to you, or your qualifications, or your interesting history, then to let go of that, to let go, to not be interested in your own story. It's like, oh, but it's my story. That can be challenging, and so the practice encourages the recognition that to really free the heart, there needs to be a letting go of all of that, the psychological homes as well as the physical homes. And as Luang Por puts it here, the idea of owning, hanging on to things, is the illusion of the worldly life. When we develop that insight into anatta, then there's a recognition of what can be owned, and what is there really to do any owning. You can say, well, this is my face mask. Well, a year ago, the concept of me having a face mask didn't exist, and now this is mine, but it'll wear out at a certain point, and it won't be my face mask anymore. Or this is my bookmark, that this came from, I think, a trip to Oxford. Somebody bought me some bookmarks, and so this is now my bookmark, but before too long it'll go its own way and it won't be mine anymore. But then if we look, well, if we say that's mine, but what is there here that can really own anything, even this body or this mind? say, this is my mind or my thoughts, my memories, what does the owning organ or agent look like? That you can't find an owner, or no thing can really be owned. And that's a very important insight. When the Buddha was describing Nibbana as the island, in the Sutta Nipata, when the Buddha is talking about the image of Nibbana as the island that you cannot go beyond, he uses the words anadanang and akinchanang. The Nibbana is a place of non-possession, of non-owning, anadanang. Akinchanang is a place of no-thingness. So that peacefulness is about not owning, letting go of the mental structure where there can be an owner. Things are still experienced, the flow of perceptions and feelings and emotions and moods and attitudes, they're experienced, they're known by the quality of awareness, but they're not owned, they don't belong, they're not possessed. It's anadanang, all of the field of experience is not ownable. And that challenges the habits of self-view, so that the ego goes, oh, don't take that away from me as well. But at least there's that kind of a reflex of self-centered thinking. But then at the same moment, that along with that bitterness, there's a sweetness of relief, of the citta recognizing, well, of course, how could there be anything to be owned, and what is there to own it? Who is there to own anything, really? And there's a peacefulness, a relief, and ease in that. So I'll close there for